Hello, hello. How are
I'm
you?
very well. How are you?
I'm good. Nice to meet you,
Nice to meet you as
Hasan, and
well.
thank you for
Yeah.
doing this. hmm Yeah, I feel like it's very interesting how we've met because I think we have a history like at BitMaker, which is an online, and also it was in person at some point. Basically like boot camp for
Yep.
software, but I don't think it exists anymore, as far as I know.
Yeah, it got acquired by General Assembly. And that's how I remember it last time. I'm not sure if it's still running
Yeah.
if it's under General Assembly name, but yeah.
It's exciting to know when these things, when you've actually like outlived the institution that is basically like feeding you on a daily basis because we did a lot of this for our
Yeah.
jobs, right? So, yeah, that's really, really cool. And what are you currently doing? What are you currently working?
S- Yeah. So my background has been mostly software development. So I am a senior software
Mhm.
developer. Building products. Staying very close with the technical side of things. So, building tools, building new software products
Mhm.
for consumers, and,
Mhm.
just solving bugs, solving technical challenges, and all that stuff, basically. And then, I'm always looking for new technical problems to solve, even as like, side
Mhm.
projects. I have a bunch of them that are active and working
Yeah.
closely with the different tools. But yeah, basically a software developer, essentially.
Awesome. I mean, I literally work with software development all
Okay.
day as a designer, which is really exciting. And the teams are what engage me. One thing I really love, is that like as developers, you're actively encouraged to always contribute back to the community, which is something that's really strong. I think throughout any like enterprise institution that's hiring today. And I really liked when you said that you're doing stuff outside of work that still contributes to that
Yeah,
community.
yeah, yeah. I think the best way to learn is to continue doing things outside of work, because that's where you can actually do things that interest you more. You
Mhm.
can pick up any project you like, and then you can try experimenting with different tool sets, and then you have freedom on your laptop to work with any technology you want. So that's always nice to have to do those things.
100%. And I think a lot of people forget that, in today's world is that a lot of that information is so democratized in terms of what you actually have access to. A lot of it is already out there on the internet. And also, you don't need really advanced tools. You just need something very rudimentary to start yourself off. And then you'll discover maybe where there are gaps for you that maybe you need to fill.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Very cool. One of the things that also drew me to kind of even having you on for this show was, a lot of your engagement right now with AI tooling and AI enablement. And you've currently been putting out some really great articles, which I'll kind of link to in the bottom of this video too, around how you have been building with AI. And so one of my first questions to you really is, what got you started on trying to build with AI and getting invested in trying your own things with AI?
Yeah, so it's very interesting. Actually, my starting point would be very similar to how most of the people know AI at the moment. Like with LLMs, OpenAI launched their
Mhm.
GPT-3, and then somebody, I think I saw a post on TikTok or something, and they were talking about this new tool that okay, if you ask it, and so I was like, okay, let me try it,
Mhm.
right? I tried it out; it was
Right.
very exciting, and then.
Mhm.
Very soon we found out that they have an API. So that got me hooked on. I was like, okay, APIs, I'm into that. I'm gonna try doing things.
Yeah.
So I went online, tried to start reading about documentation and capabilities, and I was like, this is interesting. At that point, I didn't know how to use it. Obviously, I was like, okay, I
Right.
can just do it via API layer. But everything
Mhm.
started off from the hype that came around. I think it was 2022. I heard said around that time, and then I think uh, basically at one point the things started to move forward with APIs, right? Like they started using integrating APIs into the software workflow. I remember I was doing a project with a friend, and we were like, how it was about generating SQL queries or something like that. So I'm like,
Mhm.
well, how about we ask ChatGPT about it, right? and we ask it a question. I was able to like generate a SQL query. And I was like, oh
Mhm.
wow, there's like, we get paid to do that, and it's like able to do that. So that's kind of like moved me towards going through that. And then eventually I did a lot more
Yeah.
projects into a lot of my work started off as side projects, and then even in our workplace, they started experimenting with them. We started talking about these tools, and then departments started forming that would have like these tool sets, and
Mhm.
then they would start providing to internal organization, okay, try using this tool or something like this. So that's how we pivoted to that basically. Yeah.
Very cool. No, I really love that kind of sort of introduction into it. A lot of it really mirrors kind of what I started working, how I started working with
Right.
AI too. I like also that the first thing you did was generate a statement on how to generate SQL queries. I work actively with data on a day-to-day basis, and one of the key things we've recently been designing actually is, SQL-based AI tool enablement within SQL editors. So, more contextually, how can I actually generate queries in context within my lines of code? And one of the cool things about, I think, for me at least, is that it is that element of convenience. It is that element of immediate understanding that you could just, you're not waiting for information to come from somewhere else. You're really just getting it right then and there. And you're getting it in a very consumable way, which I actually feel like a lot of people like really miss, is that it's presented to you in a very, very
Right.
intuitive way. Like you can easily pick it up and then start going
Yeah,
through
yeah,
it.
exactly. And it reflecting back to like Bitmaker Labs, they taught us a lot about like test
Mhm.
driven development and like do things right rather than, so that it goes back to like you have the ability to like run those queries on your own. You can experiment a lot, and then
Right.
I find that approach much more intuitive, as well. That okay, I should try things because compute is cheap, so you can try different approaches and then
Yes.
see which one works for you rather than like figuring out good solution or something. So that's very, very interesting.
Yeah. It's true. And having that iterative approach to sort of building and kind of understanding anything, I think is super key because a lot of people don't understand that a problem is simply just something that needs to be quickly broken down into smaller bite-sized pieces. That's the joy of development, at least from my perspective, is that, you are kind of working on all of these very tiny pieces that sort of build up to kind of an idealized solution. And you are doing a lot of trial and error. Like, I think one of the things that stops people from, any kind of development is that they assume you need to
Yeah,
be perfect as what it is you're doing. And I'm always like, no, it's literally just trial and error. You just need to try it out, see if it works, break it again, and then the solution will come.
exactly. Yes, that's the way to go.
Yeah. One of the things I like that you also talked a little bit about in there is the fact that you've taught through that process of actually acquiring and understanding that knowledge from AI, like with AI and kind of building a tool with it for yourself. Like right now, when you're thinking about an idea, what is your process of engagement with the current AI tooling that you're using today?
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. So now, actually, I'm starting to. Recently, they've you might have heard of DeepSeek, right? And the reasoning models that have come up, and they are very helpful. I kind of use them like sidekicks now. So anything I want to quickly discuss, right? I have, let's say, I'm thinking about a solution for some technical challenge at work. So I would discuss it with let's say a reasoning model. It could be anyone. Say, okay, this is the problem I'm having. This is the solution I'm trying to implement for it. What do you think about it, right? Or challenge me, or tell me what's the hole, or poke it, right? So I really like the idea when it reasons with itself and I can see the thinking process, and then I'm like, okay, and then it gives a really good, like, okay, this is what you, and it really like it. It's like having that one technical friend that you can,
Yeah.
whenever you're stuck, you can call them and ask them for help. Um, that's
Yeah.
one way. Another way is to, like, if I already have a solution, right, and I ask it to improve it. For example, it's like, okay, this is my solution, I want to improve it for, let's say, scalability or for growth or exponential growth or something, right? How would
Mhm.
you do it? And it would give me like a bunch of different approaches. I'm like, okay, this is
Yeah.
fantastic, because I always needed someone to like sort of give me these advices. And so that's how I try to use it, like on a daily basis, like, at least the UI
Yeah.
web interface that we have. Yeah.
Mhm. that idea of using it to kind of reason and kind of brainstorm a lot of what it is you're thinking through, I think is actually one of its secret powers right now, because I think reasoning and it explaining things to you in the way that it explains things to you is something that a lot of people I feel currently miss. It is probably the most valuable part of it, right? Like if the model can give you a rationale for why it's come up with a solution, at that point, that is the start of
Yep.
thought, right? One thing I actually see a lot, because in some of the use cases I've been seeing recently is people will write a business plan and they'll put in a whole business plan, and they'll not necessarily need to validate that business plan with an expert per se. They're really just using something like, Gemini or ChatGPT to kind of like basically validate and vet their business idea, which is also kind of, it's interesting because I feel like what it's producing is a lot of people now just want to be entrepreneurs based on that idea alone. But I also think what's really great about it is that if it is giving you access to that knowledge, which I think before was a little bit gate kept from you. If you actually think about how we acquired information before, I think it was a little bit more procedural. It was not necessarily as quick as it is now. When it comes to you rationalizing with AI today, how are you, for example, are you in any way, like I should say, not how are you, but are you in any way training the model to kind of set your own preferences for how you want it to reason? Or are you guiding it, just based on its generalized training?
Yeah, so it's definitely, yeah. So if we talk a little bit about on that side, with it, there's a various different things to fine tune. Yeah, especially when it comes to a very specific set of data set, for example. Like a lot of times you want it to talk to an LLM about a very specific thing, which it might not be trained on. For example, it's like a personal thing, right? For example, insurance deep plans or something you want to provide it. Data privacy is another thing. We'll talk later about it, but let's assume that the data is all safe and you consent to that information. Then you can there are certain things like like for example temperature, for example, is there. You can control the temperature. You can set it to 0, or you can take it higher up to make it so that it's more creative in terms of its responses. So if you want more deterministic response from it, you can set the temperature to 0 and like, hey, don't use any creativity, especially for, let's say, SQL queries, for example, right? You provided a SQL, like a schema of your data set, and you like, hey, generate a SQL query. I would say, in my case, I would set the temperature, let's say, to 0, and ask it to generate a SQL query so that it can give me more, not do any creative thing, and then just give me exactly. So those sort of little things we do. There's also like RAG architecture that is a little bit more custom solution, but that's to come overcome some challenges about like context window, for example. We all know we cannot just dump everything in the chat window and then it would say, oh, token consumed or something. So you can use different architecture styles to like get around those challenges, essentially. So those are some of the things that I use very frequently in my experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think that really speaks to the adaptability of it in terms of how it already is so flexible in terms of you and understanding what your workflow is, and you coming up with solutions with what may already exist today. I really like the example in there where you talked a little bit about, feeding it certain types of data, maybe that's much more personal to you. But I also think, to your point, like people don't necessarily understand that data sets are also free. Like there are a lot of free data sets online that they can just easily go out and experiment with, and they can try things with and build with. One thing I really liked, for example, recently is like people doing a lot of financial analysis with AI and training that data, just using kind of like generally found data sets to kind of get very predictive about what it is that's actually happening in the market right now. And then that is kind of guiding them on particular market movements. Granted, obviously you should never follow through with and just solely an AI solution. But I think for anyone, like for example, for myself, maybe I don't have that familiarity with financial analysis. Now I have a tool that's actually going to help me with this, and I don't have to call an advisor and have a full conversation with an advisor to do this. What do you feel is, the right way in which people should begin to kind of start trying some of the things out with AI?
Yeah. So because these things are changing so rapidly, I would say, explore the different options that are on these tools. So if you see anything new there, a different, if you see a drop down that you can select different models, you can start by selecting different models. Now they have these, you can upload certain things there as well. You can do, reasoning. You can also search on, you can search on web too. You can ask it to, like, hey, how about you
Mhm.
search this thing? So exploring these features with your data sets. I mean, you can try with a safe sort of data set. Don't have to be anything that's too,
Mhm.
that has anything personal things,
Yes.
right? But and you can mask the data as well. Like you can create a
Mhm.
separate data set. Let's say you have certain statements, account statements or something. Well, you want to feed it, keep a safe file, and this shouldn't have anything additional. And then try different approaches, and then see how it helps, and then uh, build on it. We also, I think, one thing I wanted to should have chatted a little bit earlier about is prompts as well. Like,
Mhm.
prompt engineering itself is a very vast sort of field, and a lot of working is being done on it. But having a really good
Yeah.
prompt, showing, like telling, your LLM to, what they are, what they're intending to do, what they shouldn't be doing. That
Mhm.
takes it to a next level as well. Your the what
Yes.
How it responds. So for financial analysis, for example, if you tell the tool that, hey, you're an experienced financial analyst, and this is the data you're working with, this data has these many fields, this field relate to that outcome, define all the columns, give it really good, like, details about it, and then be like, okay, you need to respond in this way, in this tone, or,
Mhm.
and then and you will do miracles. Like, it makes a lot of difference. So yeah, trying out different techniques helps a lot.
No, I love that you brought that up, because one of the things I've been reading and kind of writing a lot about recently is actually attributing personas to your models. Before you actually come in with a request for something, you need to build a persona, and you almost need to build that persona for the model, because the model at one point is almost just like, it's like just like a vacuum, and you need to give it a personality. You need to give it ideas around what or how it should be thinking. And building a persona for a model, I think, is really key, because setting that context off the bat means that whatever you're generating obviously becomes more accurate, as you've described. I also think it gives it a position. So if you're ever building out a workflow, especially when it's something that's more agentic, it gives it a role, and defining that role for the model, I think, is so key, because it really makes it really tells you exactly what your system is going to be doing. I think a lot of people just assume when I show up at the doorstep of the model, it's just like I'm just going to ask it whatever I want to ask it. I don't need to give it any definition. I don't need to define what the model is. But a part of it actually does
Yeah,
involve that.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. One of the things I also think was really cool was, that you also talked a little bit about some of the difficulties that you had when you were kind of describing some of your tutorials. Like, I think in some of them you talk about the difficulties doing certain things, or some places where you hit maybe a bump in the road. What were ways in which you were working around those to kind of come up with the solutions that you were doing?
Yeah, so I think the some like one of the biggest issues, I think, with with these LLM models are, there are quite a few issues, but one thing is like data governance. For example, I was chatting earlier about it. Like, there's a concern about, you are, whenever you chat with the GPT, that the data gets used to retrain the model, and that
Mhm.
is a big concern. So for data governance, how, like, there are a few ways you can go about it. Like, now that DeepSeek has done their open source, it's possible for you to basically have version completely locally. So if you have a decent processor and GPU in your
Mhm.
machine, you could run the model locally. So that takes off all the
Mhm.
risks associated with data, because the data is all local. So that's one way.
Right.
And then the other way is to use cloud hosted solutions such as like Azure OpenAI, for example. You can create your own instance of
Mhm.
OpenAI, and then it's local to you, for your tenant.
Mhm.
So these are two ways to, like,
Mhm.
work around the data governance. side of things. Another issue, another like a big is the context window, as I was mentioning, on the token limitations that come on.
Mhm.
Models have parameters, and then how to work around that are their architectural ways. You could use like vectorization, like RAG I was mentioning, which is retrieval augmented generation.
Mhm.
So essentially, to boil it down, RAG is simply that you are chatting just like a regular person with ChatGPT. It's only that there's one layer where you are retrieving only the most relevant information to your query. So that basically working around the context window limitations. So you only provide like 1,000 words that are related to your query. So let's say if you ask something to a RAG architecture or a RAG tuned LLM, it will basically fetch the most relevant question to answer to your query, and then ask ChatGPT to, hey, make sense of this along with the user's question.
Mhm.
So that is really helpful, because if you even think about it from like a regular conversation perspective, you asking me a question, I only, like, in my head, I'm only looking for the information which you would answer that question, and not have to focus on everything else.
Mhm.
So that's another, it sound like, oh, okay, it's very technical, but it's not too technical. It's just that you are just finding like a relevant text, uh, like to switching it with like your normal question, and then you're asking ChatGPT, hey, answer me based on what I provided you. So it feels like the AI is trained on your data, but it's really
Mhm.
that what I just mentioned.
It is that element of focus and you really making sure that you are confining the breadth within which it works is really, really key, right? Like I think one of the things that a lot of people also forget right now is that there is a cost associated to all of this. RAG architecture is great when you're trying to be more cost effective and you're trying to make sure that, it's only relevant to you in your case and you're not, prompting in a very broad way. And so those kind of expectations also of your model, I think, are something that people will learn to kind of work
Yeah,
with.
I just like I mentioned, like one with the articles that you will attach, like the articles about RAG that I mentioned, you could literally build that system in, like, if you are a little bit familiar with VS Code and all that stuff, you could build a solution like 15 to 20 minutes. So it's getting that simple
100%.
now.
I think that that's the exciting part about it, and I also feel like that's the also a little bit
Yeah,
scary
yeah.
part about it at the same time. But that's also a really good segue to kind of some of the crowdsourced questions. So I asked some of my audience members on my Instagram, what are things that maybe they want to know about AI, and what do they feel like would be things that would engage them. So I've come up with three randomly picked questions. The first one is, what is a good entry level way to start to learn more about engaging with AI? And I think you've answered some parts of it. I don't know if you want to add more to.
Yeah, so I think a good way is, I was thinking about this. So I think there's so many products out there. Every big corporation has launching their own version of ChatGPT or LLMs, right? And I think exploring each one of them and just talking with him, same question, trying different places. You can try Gemini, you can try OpenAI, like DeepSeek,
Mhm.
Grok, all these tools, and then see what variations they have, how fast they are.
Mhm.
So that way, we would know exactly, like, uh, how to sort of how each of these prompts work on each of these LLMs, and then which one works best for your case, and then use that one for further doing the work. But I think in the end, it does boil down to like using these same tools. Essentially, that's how they're being
Mhm.
used in the back end too, somewhat. There's everything that we do in the back end, there is always a way to do it from the front end, like the chat. So
100%.
yeah, I mean, trying out different tools, and just asking them questions, trying different prompts, different so each of these models, you'll have different each of these services have different models too. So try different models, try different capabilities. If they have search capabilities, vision
Mhm.
capabilities, all those things can like help understand which one works the best for your use case.
Exactly. No, that's really, really key. I think, I really like that you mentioned vision capabilities in there. I was recently using Google Studio, sorry, AI Studio. And now that AI Studio can actually like see your screen, it can tell you literally everything that you would need to do, right? Like it can literally walk you through what would need to happen on your interface. So tutorials are now no longer, necessarily as like abstract. There's literally something on your screen that's going to tell you click here, do this, right? But no, I really like that. And I think trying different things obviously is always key. Where do you currently see AI having the most value for?
So I think right now I feel like um, it's basically the agents, right? The agentic flow, and the before that the automation used to be very like programmatic. Like we would make the decision making layer, if else statements would be written by a programmer,
Mm-hmm.
like we making that decision. But now with capabilities like function calling, this is a little bit of a technical part, but
Right.
essentially function calling is basically telling LLM, hey, this is my function. If you provided these arguments, it will return this, right? So it makes the decision of
Yes.
what to pass into that function. So that sort of replaces that if else condition that we used to write before, and then let the agent make those calls themselves. So that
Yeah.
agentic workflow is going to take off a lot of like heavy lifting from us, and then humans can focus more on the core business values and let agents do the heavy lifting. So I'll give you an example. For example, I'm a web development agency now. A typical process involves me researching businesses that don't have a good website, and then calling them up, and
Right.
then booking a demo with them. Or this thing I tried, there's like the tools like you were mentioning, Cursor AI, for example. Or there's a
Mhm.
bold.new. There are a few tools where you can just give a prompt, it will create a sample website like in a seconds, right? So have an agent, like for example, have an agent do all of that, finding leads, building a website for them, scheduling a call with them,
Mhm.
and then all we have to do is be present in the call and show the demo. And then right, so let's say before we could handle 10 clients, now I can handle, one person can handle like
Mhm.
1,000 clients in the same time. So
And that I think is literally to the point of what it is, right? Your brain power is actually being used for the right
right.
things. The menial tasks are kind of taken
Yeah.
care of. Yeah. I, I think one thing I saw also recently, for example, is a tool like Notion's or N8N. And N8N literally gives you a visual workflow for your agentic workflow. And you can literally just drag and drop and connect the tools that you wanted to use, the data sets that you wanted to source, and you can visually just see kind of like the thought process in your mind of what that workflow is. And I thought that was so powerful because I was like, if I can
Yep.
see it, like the solution in my, because like I typically will draw things a lot of the times when I'm trying to solve a problem, and I'm like, this literally makes that manifest in the UI, but it's already now functional. Like you're literally just running that pipeline right after, and it's producing something for you at the end, which
Yeah,
is really cool.
and a similar tool, is in even in Azure, is more enterprise grade. It's a bit expensive, but that's why I didn't mention them
Yeah.
much. But Azure also has these really good tools to build agents, and they also have
Mhm.
for prompt flows and
Yes.
all that stuff. Which is like, if somebody is using Azure, I would recommend that you explore those tools as well. They're really good low code,
Mhm.
visualization, and then you can focus more on development of the agent.
And absolutely. And I think like that's also something that's really cool too, is that there are a lot of low code, no code solutions that you can also then validate and vet with someone. Maybe when you do have a developer on site, you can actually like kind of then use their expertise to actually like validate something. So you're coming in almost with like a prototype to say, hey, this is kind of what I'm attempting to do. And then, you can kind of build it out. I was actually like pushing my designers the other day to do something similar where I said, okay, before you come in and you kind of like bombard someone with like expectations of an interaction, if you actually like built a prototype of that interaction for someone, and then you came back to them and said, "This is kind of what I wanted to do," and then you refine and
Yep.
tune it together. That really takes away from like that a lot of the noise, right? Because there's always that back and forth in the beginning, trying to figure these things out, and now you're like, "No, this is really a prototype solution of what I'm thinking of," and now we just refine and it produces.
Yep. Yep.
Awesome. One of the last questions I got is, what are some beginner AI programs that would be helpful for video and 3D, like Comfy UI? That's a good question.
Yeah, so because I had this question and I tried looking for the answer for from a developer perspective. Like, there's a lot of like GitHub repositories. I search for them that can do that, but there are also really good like user facing tools as well. I came across this tool. I think it's called InVideo AI, and you could give it a prompt and it gives like a working video back to you. It's not like it's not phenomenal, but it was very like, yeah, it was like you could just give a prompt and it gives back something working. So
Yeah.
you could tell it's AI generated, but still it was like you could edit it and then you could replace a few things in there and then improve it. And then I was just researching, I think the lumalabs.ai. And then that's for, have you used it? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't used it, but I was just researching it a little bit. I found it like something I should try as well. What do you think about it?
Yeah. I think, it's interesting, like for, like, again, it's like very similar to maybe even like a developer's workflow. The use case is really kind of what's defining the tool sometimes, because the tools can literally do anything at this point. They can be a tool that just does VFX, so a tool that actually generates the whole video. I think one of the things that, I liked about something like Comfy UI is a little bit of what you talked about earlier, which is data privacy, because Comfy UI works on your local drive. You literally don't have to access anything externally, and it's generating based on your own creation, right? But I think that right now there are so many options. Like Runway is another really good one. Runway, I think, actually is being used to make movies today. There are a couple of movies already out that use Runway in them. I also think something like, they're like, I use a lot of 3D built models that come from prompt generated responses. So tools like Meshcapade or Meshy, they basically just build out the mesh for you. Granted, maybe the mesh is kind of, you have to do some work around it, but it's giving you something, right? But again, I think if it comes down to the specific use case that the person has, but again, to your earlier points too, it's exploration. It's like everyone's doing everything right now, right? We're all waiting for maybe like the hybrid solution. I was telling someone the other day, I was like, someone's just going to come and look at what these 500 companies are doing and then aggregate that into one tool. And then that's it. And then that will be the end solution. And I feel like, maybe it's a bigger company like a Microsoft or Venus, but that's what.
Yeah, that's like AGI, right? Like what the vision is, eventually.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing I also really liked is that, you talked about GitHub repos. One of the things I started off when I was first building was using Huddy Spaces, because in Spaces, people were building all kinds of models for all kinds of things, right? And that is a generally accessible repository that you can just go in and you can just pull those models and work with what someone has already started with. So I think that there are a lot of solutions.
Yeah, and there are, I think, text to video solutions there as well, I believe, right? Yeah.
Tons. Like you honestly, anything. Like at this point, literally anything. The other day, I actually saw someone generate it's something that can generate animation spreadsheets for you, which basically have the time frames for an animation to take place. So it just gives you an XML file that you can just go and dump into an application like Blender or in Unity, and then it will just build the animation based on what's in the XML file from there. So that's really powerful, because that's usually like a more, again, tedious and meticulous process. And now it's taking out that need for someone to sit there and literally timestamp everything and build first timestamp. Yeah. So that's, again, so powerful. Yeah. One of the final questions I have for you is, what do you feel people should hope to do with AI, or what do you hope people would do with AI, and where do you think we will go next today?
Yeah, so that's a very good I think it's a great tool for learning and development. I think, from my perspective, it's become like a replacement for our traditional. We used to Google things. Now, I think, at least for myself, and
Mm-hmm.
it's now has sort of replaced Google, just because it has like the search for capabilities and all that, and it's become a major part in my decision making ability. And I'm assume like I'm anticipating is going to become part of people's decision making process, and especially with reasoning combined with the search capabilities, becoming your sidekick sort of. And then so for I'll give you an example. The other day I was at the mechanic shop, and he looked at my problem, and then he's like, okay, this is how much I'm going to charge you. So generally I would talk to my father-in-law or someone who's like experienced, and then ask them, hey, so I tried calling him, but he wasn't available. So I was like, okay, what should I do? And the first thing was like, okay, how about I ask chat, like a DeepSeek was there, right? So I was like, okay, let me ask DeepSeek what it thinks should be happening, right? And then it gave me a very good like response, and it was kind of like somebody experienced. So I'm like, in that capacity, if we could use AI and it can become like like a Jarvis or something, you could ask different solutions on. I think that's something would be very cool. I think, yeah.
Absolutely. I really love that. And I think, even in that example alone, one of the things that, like for me, that makes me very passionate about AI as a whole is that it democratizes information for you, right? Like before, everything that maybe you learned in that time frame about, maybe how the car works would have been behind the mechanic, or you would have had to contact another mechanic or someone at least a little bit
Yep.
technically savvy. Now, all of that's just as easily accessible to you. And one of the key reasons I keep pushing people to engage with AI now is because there will come a point where that gatekeeping element will also penetrate AI itself, where they will begin to kind of limit what it has access to, and therefore you will again be
Right.
limited, right? Whereas right now, because it's so open, and there's so much of it everywhere, and it's like the Wild West, right? Like it's like tomorrow you wake up, someone's got an AI tool, and that means that all the information is out there. So gather all the information now, I would
Yeah.
as well. Yeah, yeah. Where can people find you online? I'm going to link obviously to your Medium articles, but is there anywhere else that people can find you and kind of engage with you if that person?
Yeah, so LinkedIn is, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I also have a website. It has different handles, wherever you can connect with me. Yeah, I can share that with you as well. But I'm
Awesome.
very happy to chat about it, answer any questions, and I'm very happy to help people learn if they really want to learn technical side of things. But yeah.
Yeah. No, that's awesome, Hasan. And I think I think that's one of the reasons that I immediately messaged you, because I was like, I felt like I learned so much from those articles. And I was like, this is really cool that you're doing this for people and for free, which I think a lot of people are like, what? Like, you have to pay for more.
Appreciate that.
But what's really nice about it is like, it's the sharing, right? And I think that this has also been very insightful for me. I've learned again today, again, a lot from you. So I'd like to thank you again for like doing this, for taking the time to come and chat with me about this. And hopefully we'll do another one in the future, maybe when there are more advanced tools that have shown up, because I know things are changing.
Yeah, I just want to thank you as well, for reaching out to me. And I know we spoke very long time back, and you gave me some really good advice, and it kind of shaped my career as well. So I'm really appreciative of that. So yeah, thank you so much for that, and it was really great conversing with you about
You're
it. Yeah,
welcome. Absolutely. And we'll do this again very
thank you.
soon.